Over 60, top 6 vegetables you must eat daily for strong eyes. Let me ask you something. What if I told you that the difference between keeping your eyesight sharp into your 70s or slowly watching the world fade into blur could be sitting right there in your refrigerator? Sounds unbelievable, right? But here's the truth. The foods you eat can literally decide whether you keep driving at night, reading your favorite books, and recognizing the faces you love, or whether those things slowly slip away. Some doctors will tell you vision loss after 60 is just part of aging. I'm here to tell you that's not the whole story. Science has proven that certain vegetables can act like medicine for your eyes, lowering your risk of blindness, protecting you from cataracts, and even sharpening your night vision. And the shocking part, these are not rare superfoods from across the world. They're simple, everyday vegetables most people ignore or eat too little of. Think about this. Kale, a leafy green you might pass by at the store, has been shown to cut the risk of macular degeneration by nearly a third. Carrots, yes, the humble carrot, can help restore your ability to see in the dark. And red bell peppers, they pack more vitamin C than oranges and can slow cataracts before they steal your sight. Surprised yet? You should be. In this video, I'll reveal the top 6 vegetables every person over 60 should be eating daily to protect and even strengthen their vision. These are backed by decades of research and real patient stories I've seen firsthand in my medical practice. But before we jump in, do me a quick favor, hit that like button, share this video with someone you care about, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support is what keeps us motivated to keep bringing you health tips that can truly change your life. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at your dinner plate the same way again. Why eyes weaken after 60? To understand how vegetables can save your sight, we first need to understand why vision tends to weaken as we age. The human eye is an extraordinary organ. In a space no bigger than a golf ball, you have the cornea focusing light, the lens adjusting it, the retina capturing it, the macula sharpening the details, and the optic nerve sending those signals to your brain. It is a perfect orchestra until time begins to interfere. After 60, subtle changes start to appear. Light entering the eye generates free radicals, unstable molecules that gradually wear down delicate tissues in the retina. This process, known as oxidative stress, is one of the silent forces behind age-related vision decline. Then there is macular degeneration, the leading cause of vision loss in older adults, which robs people of their central vision. Cataracts follow closely behind, as proteins inside the lens clump together, leaving millions of seniors with cloudy, blurred eyesight. By age 75, more than half of Americans will have cataracts. Glaucoma, often called the silent thief of sight, builds slowly and quietly, damaging the optic nerve with increased pressure until the loss is permanent. And for many, dry eyes make daily life uncomfortable, as the body simply produces fewer tears with age, leaving eyes irritated and vulnerable. Here is the empowering truth. Diet matters more than most people realize. Studies have shown that nutrients like lutein and zeaxanthin can act like natural sunglasses, filtering harmful blue light. Beta-carotene and vitamin A help us see in dim settings, while vitamins C and E protect the lens and retina from oxidative stress. These aren't rare chemicals found in expensive supplements. They're found in everyday vegetables, the same foods you can add to your plate tonight. I often ask my patients a simple question. When was the last time you thought of your dinner plate as eye protection? Most people think about glasses, medications, or surgery, but rarely about the power of food. Yet decades of research confirm what I've seen in practice for years. Patients who consistently include the right vegetables not only slow down vision decline, but in many cases preserve sharp eyesight well into their 70s and 80s. This is why I recommend 6 vegetables in particular to all of my patients over 60. They're not exotic and they're certainly not expensive, but they deliver the exact nutrients the eyes need to fight oxidative stress, reduce the risk of cataracts, protect the macula, and keep you independent. The evidence is clear, the science is strong, and the choice is in your hands. Aging is inevitable, but losing your vision doesn't have to be. Kale, the king of eye health. Kale is not just a trendy vegetable. It is one of the most powerful foods for protecting your eyesight as you age. What makes kale special is its rich supply of lutein and zeaxanthin, 2 carotenoids that act like natural sunglasses. These compounds concentrate in the macula, the central part of the retina that allows you to read, recognize faces, and see fine details. By filtering out harmful blue light from screens and sunlight, they help prevent damage that leads to macular degeneration, the #1 cause of blindness in older adults. The science behind kale's benefits is strong. The ARDS-2 study, A major clinical trial conducted by the National Eye Institute showed that seniors with higher intakes of lutein and zeaxanthin reduced their risk of advanced macular degeneration by as much as 32%. Other studies have confirmed that people who regularly eat kale and similar leafy greens have greater macular pigment density, which directly translates to stronger eye protection. I've seen this play out in my own patients. Margaret, a 72-year-old retired librarian, came to me worried about her family history of macular degeneration. She began eating kale in smoothies, salads, and even homemade kale chips. Within 6 months, her eye exams showed measurable improvement in the very pigments that protect her vision. Another patient, John, a 68-year-old truck driver, had never eaten kale before in his life. Once he started adding it to his soups and side dishes, not only did his eyesight stabilize, but his cholesterol levels improved as well. Kale's benefits extend beyond the eyes, supporting heart health, bone strength, and overall inflammation control. The common objection I hear is that kale tastes too bitter. But the truth is, preparation makes all the difference. Lightly sautéing kale in olive oil softens the flavor and enhances the absorption of carotenoids. Pairing it with healthy fats such as avocado or walnuts helps your body use those nutrients more effectively. Blending kale into fruit smoothies or baking it into crispy chips are easy ways to make it enjoyable. A single cup of cooked kale delivers more lutein than many supplements, along with vitamin K, vitamin C, magnesium, and fiber, nutrients that seniors often need more of. For anyone over 60, kale isn't just another leafy green. It's one of the smartest daily investments you can make in your eyesight and your independence. Spinach, the gentle protector. Spinach has long been called a superfood, and when it comes to protecting aging eyes, it truly earns that title. Like kale, spinach is packed with lutein and zeaxanthin, two nutrients that build up in the macula and shield it from damaging blue light. But spinach goes a step further, offering vitamin K, folate, and iron, which help maintain strong circulation and steady blood flow to the eyes. Just 1 cup of cooked spinach can provide more than 20 milligrams of lutein, far exceeding the daily amount most experts recommend for eye protection. The evidence is convincing. A large study published in Ophthalmology showed that seniors who ate spinach or other leafy greens at least 3 times a week had a much lower risk of cataracts than those who rarely included them in their diet. Researchers at Harvard also found that higher intakes of leafy greens were linked to slower progression of age-related macular degeneration, suggesting that spinach not only helps keep the retina strong, but also protects the lens from clouding. I think often about my patient Helen, who was in her late 60s when she came to me. She complained that glare from headlights made driving at night nearly impossible. Together, we made simple changes: spinach in her morning omelet, sautéed spinach with garlic at dinner, and even smoothies blended with spinach and fruit. Just a few months later, she told me she felt safer driving at night, and her eye exam confirmed her vision had stabilized. Another patient, Daniel, age 70, replaced the iceberg lettuce in his daily salads with spinach. A year later, his cataracts were progressing more slowly than expected, and his blood pressure had improved as well, a reminder that what's good for the eyes often benefits the whole body. So let me ask you, when you picture spinach, do you see it as a bland side dish or as a daily defense for your eyesight? The truth is, spinach can be prepared in countless ways: tossed into eggs, stirred into soup, blended into a smoothie, or quickly sautéed with olive oil. Cooking it lightly enhances the absorption of its protective carotenoids, while eating it raw in a salad still delivers powerful nutrients. The most important thing is consistency. For those over 60, spinach is not just another vegetable. It is a gentle protector, working quietly every day to keep your vision clear and your independence intact. Carrots, the night vision friend. Carrots are one of the most recognized vegetables for eye health, and their reputation is well-deserved. They are rich in beta-carotene, a compound the body converts into vitamin A, which is essential for producing rhodopsin, the pigment that allows the eyes to adjust in low light. Without enough vitamin A, vision becomes compromised at night, and in severe cases, night blindness can occur. The World Health Organization notes that vitamin A deficiency is still the leading cause of preventable blindness worldwide, showing just how critical this nutrient is for protecting eyesight. Scientific research continues to highlight the role carrots play in preserving vision. A study in the British Journal of Ophthalmology found that diets higher in beta-carotene were linked to a reduced risk of age-related macular degeneration and better night vision. Researchers at Tufts University also reported that people who consumed carotenoid-rich foods regularly had a significantly lower risk of cataracts compared to those with low intake. These findings remind us that something as simple as including carrots in the diet can make a meaningful difference for long-term eye health. In my own practice, I've seen how small dietary changes add up. Robert, a 70-year-old farmer, came to me with difficulty driving after sunset. While healthy overall, his meals lacked orange vegetables. Together we introduced carrots into his routine, raw sticks with hummus, roasted carrot soup, and even carrot juice a few times a week. Within months, his ability to see at dusk improved noticeably, and his eye exam confirmed stronger night vision. Another patient, Mary, age 68, had dry eyes and mild vision concerns. Adding carrots and other vitamin-rich foods helped restore her tear quality and ease her discomfort. So how often do you reach for carrots in your daily meals? Too often people treat them as just a garnish or an occasional snack, but they deserve a regular place at the table. Roasting them with olive oil brings out natural sweetness while boosting nutrient absorption. Light steaming keeps them tender and nutrient-rich, and raw carrots make for an easy, portable snack. Pairing carrots with healthy fats like avocado or nuts further enhances the body's ability to absorb vitamin A. Carrots may be simple, but their benefits are powerful. For older adults, they offer protection against cataracts, strengthen night vision, and support everyday independence. The next time you add carrots to your plate, remember you're not just eating a vegetable, you're giving your eyes the tools they need to stay strong for years to come. Sweet potatoes, the orange powerhouse. Sweet potatoes are one of the most underrated foods for eye health, yet they pack an incredible punch. A single medium sweet potato provides more than 200% of your daily vitamin and needs, thanks to its high beta-carotene content. Once converted in the body, vitamin A plays a vital role in maintaining clear vision and protecting the retina, especially in low-light conditions. Beyond beta-carotene, sweet potatoes also offer vitamin C, potassium, and fiber, making them a more complete source of nutrition compared to many other starchy foods. The science is clear. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Nutrition showed that people with higher intakes of beta-carotene from foods such as sweet potatoes had much lower rates of age-related macular degeneration progression. Additional research in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that diets rich in beta-carotene were linked to a reduced risk of cataracts in older adults. These findings confirm that sweet potatoes are more than a comfort food. They are a natural defense against some of the most common causes of vision loss after 60. I often think of Janet, a 74-year-old patient with early macular degeneration. She enjoyed potatoes but typically ate the white variety. I suggested she switch to baked sweet potatoes several nights a week. After a year, her ophthalmologist reported that the progression of her AMD had slowed significantly, and Janet herself noticed that reading in dim light felt easier. Another patient, Harold, 71, replaced refined carbs with roasted sweet potatoes and experienced not only better eye health, but also steadier blood sugar levels, a benefit that reinforced the connection between diet and long-term wellness. So here is something to consider. If a simple change like swapping white potatoes for sweet potatoes could preserve your eyesight, why not start tonight? Preparation is easy, baking or steaming keeps their nutrients intact, and adding a drizzle of olive oil enhances the absorption of beta-carotene. A sprinkle of cinnamon not only brings out their natural sweetness, but also adds extra antioxidants. From mashed sweet potatoes to roasted wedges, the options are versatile and satisfying. For seniors looking to maintain strong vision, sweet potatoes are not just a colorful addition to the plate. They are a powerful, delicious way to strengthen night vision, slow the progression of macular degeneration, and support overall health at the same time. Bell peppers, the vitamin C champion. Bell peppers are often overlooked when it comes to eye health, yet they are among the richest sources of vitamin C you can eat. Many people assume oranges are the gold standard, but red bell peppers actually contain more vitamin C per serving than most citrus fruits. This vitamin plays a vital role in supporting collagen, the protein that gives structure to the cornea, and it also helps protect the lens of the eye from oxidative stress that leads to cataracts. In fact, vitamin C is one of the few nutrients shown consistently to slow the clouding of the lens that so many seniors experience. The research is compelling. The long-term nurses' health study found that women with the highest vitamin C intake had a 75% lower risk of cataract progression compared to those with the lowest intake. Another study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition reported that adults with diets rich in vitamin C and antioxidants had a reduced risk of developing age-related macular degeneration as well. This tells us that bell peppers, particularly the brightly colored red and yellow varieties, are more than just a vibrant addition to your plate. They are a daily defense against vision decline. In my own practice, I recall Linda, a 69-year-old teacher who came to me with frequent blurry spots. Her diet was heavy on processed foods and lacked fresh vegetables. We made a simple change, half a red bell pepper added to her daily salad. Within months, she not only felt more energetic, but her ophthalmologist noted that her cataract development had slowed. Another patient, George, in his early 70s, struggled with constant eye strain and mild, dry eyes. By adding bell peppers to his stir-fries and snacks, he reported improved clarity and less discomfort, reminding me how quickly the body can respond when given the right nutrients. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you added bell peppers to your meals? Most people think of them as a garnish or something to toss in a stir-fry once in a while, but they deserve a more consistent place on your plate. Eating them raw, sliced with hummus, or tucked into a salad preserves the most vitamin C. Lightly sautéing them keeps most of their nutrients intact while enhancing their natural sweetness. Red peppers contain the highest levels of vitamin C, but yellow and orange peppers also provide excellent benefits. For seniors looking to strengthen their vision, bell peppers are a simple, flavorful way to support collagen, protect the cornea, and lower the risk of cataracts. They are affordable, versatile, and easy to prepare. The question is not whether they work. The science is already clear. The real question is whether you're willing to let this colorful vegetable become part of your daily routine. Broccoli, the multitasker. Broccoli may be one of the most versatile vegetables, but when it comes to eye health, it is also one of the most powerful. It contains a unique blend of nutrients, lutein, vitamin C, beta-carotene, and a special compound called sulforaphane. Lutein and beta-carotene strengthen the retina and protect against oxidative stress, while vitamin C supports collagen in the cornea and lowers the risk of cataracts. Sulforaphane is particularly interesting because it activates the body's own antioxidant defenses. A study published in Molecular Vision found that sulforaphane protects retinal cells from light-induced damage, one of the key triggers in age-related macular degeneration. This means broccoli doesn't just supply nutrients directly, it also helps your body defend itself more effectively. In my practice, I often recommend broccoli to patients with early signs of vision decline. George, a 76-year-old with early-stage glaucoma, is one example. While food alone cannot cure glaucoma, broccoli played an important role in his diet. Alongside his prescribed medication, he began eating broccoli several times a week, steamed with olive oil, sometimes added into soups or tossed into stir-fries. Over time, his eye pressure stabilized, and his ophthalmologist noted that oxidative stress markers in his eyes had improved. Another patient, Claire, in her early 70s, had a family history of cataracts. She disliked taking supplements, so we focused on food. By adding broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables into her weekly meals, her lens clarity remained stable for years longer than expected. So here is something worth asking yourself. How often do you make broccoli part of your weekly meals? Many people see it as a boring side dish, yet it is one of the few foods that combines protection for the retina, the cornea, and even the optic nerve. To get the most out of broccoli, steaming it for 3 to 4 minutes preserves the nutrients while keeping the texture tender. Adding a drizzle of olive oil and a squeeze of lemon not only enhances flavor, but also boosts nutrient absorption. Light roasting or tossing it into pasta and grain bowls are also easy ways to make it enjoyable. For older adults, broccoli is a true multitasker. It supports the retina, helps shield the eyes from damaging light, reduces oxidative stress, and contributes to overall health. It is not just another green vegetable. It is a tool for preserving vision and independence well into later life. So let's bring it all together. We've talked about why vision tends to weaken after 60 and the 6 vegetables that can help protect your eyes: kale, spinach, carrots, sweet potatoes, bell peppers, and broccoli. They may seem ordinary, but the truth is these simple foods are extraordinary tools to keep your eyesight sharp, your independence strong, and your life full of clarity. I've seen it in research, and I've seen it in my own patients. Those who make small, consistent changes, adding these vegetables into their daily meals, often slow down vision loss, reduce their risk of cataracts, and in some cases even see measurable improvements. Your dinner plate can be your prescription for stronger eyes. The choice is in your hands. So let me ask you, tomorrow when you plan your meals, will you give your eyes what they need to stay strong? Remember, it's never too late to start. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button, share it with a friend or loved one who needs this information, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our weekly health tips. Your support means the world to us and keeps us motivated to bring you more science-backed advice for living your best life after 60. Take care of your eyes, take care of your health, and I'll see you in the next video.